Continuing with Fragment 3, Text 44's comment. This means acquire sympathy with the universal soul of nature. This soul of nature is here spoken of course, imagined as something entirely contrary to anything we really know of nature. In fact, it would be difficult to distinguish it from a pious fiction. The only reason it can be given for assuming the soul of nature to be pure, calm, kind, and all the other Tea Party virtues, not the same that people say nowadays, is lucus a non lucendo. To put it in some kind of logical form, the manifested is not the unmanifested. Therefore, the manifested is that by which the unmanifested is not. Nature, as we know it, is stupid, brutal, cruel, beautiful, extravagant, and above all the receptacle or vehicle of illimitable energy. However, by meditation one comes to a quite different view of nature. Many of the stupidities and brutalities are only apparent. The beauty, the energy, and the majesty are, if you prefer it, the love, remain undeniable. It is the first reversed triangle of the tree of life. What is said of some vritte is nonsense. The vrittis are impressions of the causes, of the impressions. Some vritti is simply the sum of these. Here we have Aleya identified with Atman. The rest of the burst is mostly poetic nothing, and there is no guide to the meaning of the word soul. It is a perfectly absurd theory to regard the body as capable of inflicting wounds upon the soul, which is apparently the meaning here. The definition of Atma gives impassibility as almost its prime condition. From the phrase control and master both, we must suppose that the soul here spoken of is some intermediate principle for simply nefesh. The verse may again be dismissed as too easily indulgent in poetic diction. A properly controlled mind should not be subject to these illusions. And although it may be conceded that these things, although illusions, do correspond with a certain reality, anything objective should have been dismissed at an earlier stage. In the mental struggles, there should be no place for demons. Unless my memory deceives me, that was just the one trouble that I did not have. The reason may possibly have been that I had mastered all external demons before I took up meditation. That can be true. No explanation is given as to why the fifth should be called the middle portal of seven. From here, verse 48 to verse 71, is the long description of this fifth gate, the key to which, it will be remembered, was virya, that is, energy, and will, manhood, in its most secret sense. It seems rather useless to tell the student to have mastery over his thoughts in this verse, because he has been doing nothing else in all the previous gates. The pupil is said to have mastery over his soul, and again there is no indication as to what is meant by soul. Bhikkhu Ananda Mateya once remarked that Theosophists were rather absurd to call themselves Buddhists, as the Buddhist had no soul, and the Theosophist not even content with having one. Instead, insisted on possessing seven different kinds. Well, ancient Egyptians kind of talked about 9 different selves, kind of. If it means nefesh, of course, this ought to have been mastered long ago. It probably means neshama, and if we take this to be so, the whole passage will become intelligible. In the beginning of progress, we have the automatic ego, the animal creator, or genitor of nefesh in Yesod, the lowest point of the ruach, and the marriage between these is the first generation. Nephesh is Syrinx, and Yesod is Pan. Nephesh is the elemental soul which seeks redemption and immortality. In order to obtain it, it must acquire a soul such as is possessed by men. Now the elemental is said to be afraid of the sword with its cross hilt, of the cross, that is to say, of the phallus, and this is what is called panic fear, which originally an individual thing is applied to a mob, because a mob has no soul. A very great many elementals are found to be are to be found in human form today. They are nearly always women, are such men as are not men. Such beings are imitative, irresponsible, always being shocked, without any standard of truth, although often extremely logical, criminal without a sense of right and wrong, and as shameless as they are prudish. Truth of any kind frightens them. They are usually Christian scientists, spiritualists, theosophists, or whatnot. They reflect the personality of a man with extraordinary ease, and frequently deceive him into thinking that they know what they are saying. Levi remarks that the love of such beings by a magus is insensate, and may destroy him. He has had some. This doctrine is magnificently expounded in Wagner's Parsifal. The way to redeem such creatures is to withstand them, and their path of redemption is the path of service to the man who has withstood them. However, when at the right moment the crucified one, the extended one, the secret Savior, consents to redeem them, and can do so without losing his power, without any way yielding to them, their next step is accomplished, and they are reborn as men. This brings us back to our subject, for the low man, of whom we are still speaking, possesses above Yesod 5 forms of intellect, and Da'ath their crown. We then come to another marriage, on a higher plane, the redemption of Malkuth by Tifereth, the attaining of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. The next crucial step is the sacrificing of this whole organism to the mother, Neshama, a higher soul, a higher self, which is as spiritually dark and lonely as Nephesh was material. Is it soul or self? Neshama is beyond abyss, has no concern with that bridle, but to absorb it, and by offering the blood of her son to the All-Father, that was her husband, she awakens him. He, in his turn, vitalizes the original daughter, thus completing the cycle. Now on the human plane, this All-Father is the true generative force, the real ego, of which all types of conscious ego in a man are but idola. And this true creative force is the virya, of which we are now speaking. This virya is the one pure height spoken of in this verse. It is called free from affection. It creates without desire, simply because it is its nature to create. It is this force in oneself of which one must become conscious in this stage. It should be noticed that this verse has a row of dots above and below it. There is a secret meaning to verse 51, which will be evident to anyone who's properly understood our comment on verse 49. The highest marriage, that is between Neshama and Chia, is accomplished, again, after another manner. By human passions must be understood every kind of attraction, not merely gross appetites, which have been long ago conquered, not by excluding but by regulating them. On the plane of mind itself, all is in order. Everything has been balanced by its opposite. The seeker is now passed through the abyss, where dwells Kronzon. Koronzome is the initial Enochian version of that name, whose name is Legion. All this must be studied most carefully in Liber 418. Here again is one of those unfortunate passages which enables the superficial to imagine that the task of the adept is to hunger strike and wear the blue ribbon and give up smoking. The first paragraph of this verse rather means that filling of the cup of Babylon with every drop of blood, which is explained in Liber 418. The higher ego, Holy Isle, is not the thinking self. It is the dwarf star, the self which is beyond thinking. The aspirant is now, in the fact, beyond thought, and all this talk of building high the wall or dam is too much like poetry to be good sense. What it means is beware lest the reawakened ego, the Chia, should become self-conscious, as it is liable to do owing to its wedding with Neshama, or shall we say with Nefesh, for the organism has now been brought to perfect harmony in all parts. The adept has a strong, healthy, vigorous body, and a mind no less perfect. He is a very different person from the feeble, emasculated, cabbage-chewing victim of Anatmia, with its mind which has gained what it calls emancipation by forgetting how to think. Little as it ever knew, not in such may one find the true adept. Read Liber Legis, chapter 2, verse 24, and learn where to look for hermits. We now perceive more clearly the meaning of this passage. Just as the man, in order to conquer the woman, used restraint, so also must this true soul restrain itself, even at this high stage, although it gives itself completely up, although it creates without thought and without desire. Let it do that without losing anything. And because the surrender must be complete, it must beware of that expansion which is called pride, for it is destroying duality, and pride implies duality. Once more the passage harks back to the abyss, where thoughts prevail. It is another poetic image, and not a good one. Extraordinary, how liable, this unassailable Aleister is to catch cold. Sorry about the felt sound. It isn't woe to him, it's woe to you. More trouble, more poetic image, more apparent sentimentality. Its true interpretation is to be found in the old symbolism of this rearrange of Chia and Neshama. Chia is the male, proof against seduction. Neshama, the female, that overcomes by weakness. But in actual practice, the meaning may be explained thus. You yourself have conquered. You have become perfectly indifferent, perfectly energetic, perfectly creative. But, having united yourself to the universe, you could become acutely conscious that your own fortunate condition is not shared by that which flow you are. It is, then, that the adept turns his face downwards, changes his formula from solve to coagula. His process on the upward path now corresponds exactly with his progress on the downward path. He can only save himself by saving others. For, if it were not so, he would hardly be better than he who shuts himself in his black tower of illusion, the brother of the left hand, the Klingsor of Parzival. Here is another muddle. The words soul and self have previously been used in exactly the opposite meaning. If any meaning at all is to be attached to this verse and to verse 59, it is that the progress downwards, the progress of the Redeemer of the sun as he descends from the zenith, or passes from the summer solstice to his doom, must be a voluntary absorption of death, in order to turn it unto life. Never again must the adept be deceived by his impressions, though there is that part of him which suffers. It is now evident that a most unfortunate metaphor has been chosen. A diamond is not much use when it is buried deep within the throbbing heart of the earth. The proper place for a diamond is the neck of a courtesan. That we have correctly interpreted these verses, these obscure passages, now becomes clear. No further personal effort is required. The gates open of themselves to the master of the temple. The discourse again reverts to another phase of this task of vairaga. It is just as the earth, bhavana, where you have to look at a frame of earth and reach that impression of earth, which is no earthly quality. That earth, which is not earth, as the Kabbalah would say. So on this higher plane you must reach a quintessence of thought, of which thoughts are perhaps debased images, but which in no way partakes of anything concerning them. Again, another phase of this task. Complete detachment. Perfect silence. Absolute will. This must be that pure Chia which is utterly removed from Ruach. This familiar phrase is usually interpreted to mean that the mere keeping of the mind free from invading thoughts. It has also that secret significance at which we have several times already hinted. These unfortunate poetic images again bewilder us. Blavatsky's constant use of the word soul without definition is very annoying. These verses 63 and 64 must be taken as dealing with a state preliminary to the attainment of this fifth gate. If the lance shakes in the hand of the warrior, whatever the cause, the result is fumbling and failure. This verse explains the state of the mind which has failed in the abyss. The student becomes insane. And we skip to comment on, there isn't a comment listed for 65 here. So 66. These two verses seem to mean that any attention to self would prevent one from crossing the abyss, while in the event of any inattention to self, the mind would revolt. In other words, soul means neshama, and it is important for neshama to fix its attention on Chia rather than on Ruach. The only difficulty in this verse is the word change. People who are meditating often get thrown off by the circumstances of their lives, and these circumstances must be controlled absolutely. It should, however, be taken to refer to any change in one's methods of meditation. You should make up your mind thoroughly to a given scheme of action and be bound by it. A man is perfectly helpless if, on finding one mantra unsuccessful, he tries another. There's a cumulative effect in all mystic and magical work, and the mantra you've been doing, however bad, is the best one to go on with. Verse 68 confirms our interpretation of these verses, and then we move on to the comment on 70. 69 and 70 have this comment. These verses explain the cumulative effect of which we spoke. It is very hard to persist because very often we seem to make no progress. There is the water on the fire, and nothing whatever appears to be happening. But without warning, it suddenly boils. You may get the temperature to 99 degrees and keep it at 99 for 1,000 years, and the water will not boil. Of course, I mean Celsius. Although doesn't the boiling point differ a little bit per altitude? It is the last step that does the trick. One remark in this connection may be useful. A watched pot never boils. The student must practice complete detachment, must reach the stage when he does not care 2 pence whether he attains it or not. I definitely find certain things easier at that point. While at the same time he pursues eagerly the path of attainment. This is the ideal attitude. It is very well brought out in Parsifal. Klingsor, on having his error pointed out to him, said, "Oh, that's quite easy," took a knife and removed all danger of his, ever making the same mistake again. Is that some suicide story or something? Don't commit suicide, people. Returning full of honest pride in his achievement, he found himself more ignominiously rejected than before. Oh. Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd have to figure out what exactly the story is. Ultimately, the sacred lance is brought back into the hall where is the Grail. And there, at the right moment, not moved by desire, not seduced by cundry, but of his own nature, the sacrifice may be accomplished. So as previously explained, it is important not to keep on worrying about one's progress, otherwise the concentration is lost, and a mood of irritability rises. The work is given up, and the student becomes angry with his teacher. His mind's soul becomes as a mad elephant that rages in the jungle. He may even obtain the vision of the demon Crowley, but by persistence in the appointed path, by avoiding disappointment, through not permitting the fiend hope to set its suckers on your soul, by continuing the appointed discourse in spite of Mara and his hosts, the wheel comes full circle, the hour strikes, the telepot palm blossoms, and all is fun and feasting, like Alice when she got to the 8th square. It is my daily prayer that I may be spared to write a complete commentary on the extremely mystical works of the Reynold, is that what R-E-Y is short for? C.L. Dodgson. Please note the 2 lines of dots for the last paragraph of this verse. It is the final scene of Parsifal, which words are unfitted to express. 71, 72, 73, and we have, in these 3 verses, the passage to the 6th gate is made clear. There is no longer any struggle. There is but the golden fire within the alabaster vase, and thou art that vase. Mate and female are again interchanged. Above Chia, the Neshama, is Yechida, and in the lower aspect of that, one has again become the receptacle of the infinite, not that which penetrates the infinite. There are 2 formula of making 2 things one. The active formula is that of the arrow piercing the rainbow, the cross erected upon the hill of Golgotha, and so on. The passive formula is that of the cup into which the wine is poured, that of the cloud which wraps itself around Ixion. It is very annoying to hear that Nargil is safe. This is a Oedipus complex. Why not safe in the arms of Jesus? Devil, fly away with this eternal task, with this eternal rest stuff. Give me a night's rest, now and again. A dip into the Tao, and then off we go again. There is a further terrible confusion between the personal progress of the man and his progress in relation to his incarnations. It cannot be too clearly understood that these things are altogether different. Blavatsky's attempt to mix up Hinduism and Buddhism is productive of constant friction. The first path in dhyana has nothing whatever to do with being a Srautapati. It is perfectly clear that you could become master of 8 jhanas with no more hope of becoming a Srautapati than a Hua dancer. However, this is an extremely poetical description of what happens on the 7th path. You must notice that there is a certain amount of confusion between the paths and the portals at the end of them. Apparently, one does not reach the 7th gate till the end of the treatise. A master of the day is said to refer to the Manvantara but it is also an obvious phrase where day is equivalent to sun. It's interesting to note that he is still in the West. This is the penultimate stage. He really is now, he is really now practically identical with Mayan himself. He has met and conquered the maker of illusion, become one with him. And his difficulty will then be so complete, to complete that work, that it shall be centered on itself and leave no seed, that it may subsequently germinate and destroy all that has been accomplished. The temptation at this point is to create an universe. He is able. The necessity of so doing is strong within him, and he may perhaps even imagine that he can make one which shall be free from the three characteristics. Evelyn Hall, an early love of mine, used to say, God Almighty, or words to that effect, has no conscience. And in the tremendous state of mind in which he is a state of cosmic priapism, he may very likely see red, care nothing for what may be the result to himself or his victim, and violently projecting himself on the akasa, may fertilize it, and the universe begin once more. In Liber 1, it seems as if this must be done, as if it were part of the work. And Liber Legis, if I understand it aught, would inculcate the same. For to us the three characteristics and the four noble truths are lies, the laws of illusion. Ours is the palace of the Grail, not Klingsor's castle. It is now seen that he should not do this, although he is able. He should, on the contrary, take up the burden of a magus. This whole passage will be found in much clearer language in Liber 1, Equinox 7. It should be noticed that this is not quite identical with the way in which the master of the temple detaches the being that once was called self, to fling it down from the abyss, that it may appear in the heaven of Jupiter as a morning star or as an evening star, to give light to them that dwell upon the earth. This magus is a much stronger person than the master of the temple. He is the creative force, while the master is merely the receptive. But in these verses, 78, 79, and 80, the three to follow, it may be very easily supposed that it was merely a recapitulation of the former remarks, and I am inclined to think that there is a certain amount of confusion in the mind of the author between these two gates. She attained only the lower, but careful study of these verses will incline the reader to perceive that it is a new creation which is here spoken of, not a mere amelioration. The only real difficult verse on this interpretation is 86. There is a lot of sham sentiment in this verse. It gives an entirely false picture of the adept, who does not whine, who does not play Pecksniff. All this business about protecting man from far greater misery and sorrow is absurd. For example, in one passage, H.P.B. explains that the lowest hell is a man-bearing planet. There is a certain amount of melancholia, with delusions of persecution about this verse, nature perhaps to one who was betrayed and wronged by Victoria Kremers. It is here seen that the ideal proposed by the author is by no means rest or immobility. The path, or rather the goal, is symbolized as a swift and powerful stream, and the great mystery is revealed that the path itself is the goal. Were the world understood, you would see it was good, a dance to a delicate measure. This is also the doctrine indicated in all the works of Frater Perdurabo, as you can see it in Liber 418, where as soon as a certain stage is reached, the great curse turns into an ineffable blessing, In the Book of Lies, too, the same idea is stated again and again, with repetition only unwearying because of the beauty and variety of form. Everything is sorrow, says the Buddha. Quite so to begin with. We analyze the things we deem least sorrow, and find that by taking a long enough period or a short enough period, we can prove them to be the most exquisite agony. Such is the attempt of all Buddhist writers, and even their feebler Western imitators. But once the secret of the universe is found, then everything is joy, and proposition is quite as universal. Here we have the same thesis developed with unexpected force. So far from the path being repose, the slightest slacking turns it stagnant. The same doctrine is still further detailed, but I cannot give it the authority by which Blavatsky speaks of the Quan Shi Yin as a bodhisattva. It will become abundantly evident in the comment to verse 97 that Blavatsky had not the remotest idea as to what a bodhisattva was and is, but it is quite true that you have to shed light in the manner indicated if you are going to live the life of a magus. 82 still further develops the same doctrine. You have acquired the supreme creative force. You are the word, and it must be spoken, as verse 83 indicates. There is a good deal of anticlimax in verse 83, and a peculiarly unnecessary split infinitive. Blavatsky's difficulty seems to have been that, though she is always talking of the advance of the good Narjol, he never seems to advance in point of view. Now on the threshold of the last path, he is still an ordinary person with vague visionary yearnings. It is true that he wishes the unity of all that lives, complete harmony in the parts, and perfect light in the whole. It is also true that he may spend a great deal of time in killing or otherwise instructing men, but he has not got all the old conception. The ordinary Buddhist is quite unable to see anything but details. Bhikkhu Ananda Matteya once refused to undertake the superintendence of a coconut plantation because he found that he would have to give orders for the destruction of vermin, but with the best feeling in the world, he had to eat rice, and the people who cultivated the rice had to destroy a lot of vermin too. One cannot escape responsibility in this precarious way. It is peculiarly silly because the whole point of Buddha's position is that there is no escape. The Buddhist regulations are comparable to orders, which might have been, but were not, because he was not mad, given by the captain of the Titanic to caulk the planks after the ship had been cut in two.